Welcome to Great Minds with Lost&Found, the podcast that connects people and reimagines systems to improve mental health for youth and young adults. I'm your host, Joel Kaskinen. Lost&Found is a comprehensive nonprofit organization that aims to do more to eliminate suicide for youth and young adults in the United States. Now that you know who we are and what we're all about, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Great Minds with Lost&Found, the podcast where we connect people and reimagine systems to improve mental health in the state of South Dakota. Like I said before, I am Joel Kaskinen. I'm your host, and we are recording live today in front of an audience here at Remedy Brewing Company. So thank you all to the audience members who are coming. To anyone listening, if you've not been to Remedy, please stop by and check them out the next time you are in Sioux Falls. All right, let's dive in today's conversation. For our audience members, they know a little bit already. It's with 437 Project runners, Carter Gronseth and Benson Langat. Yes. Did I pronounce that correct? Look at me go. Yeah. All right. We have Benson and Carter with us today. So we are just going to start with a brief introduction. So can I just have both of you share who you are, a brief synopsis of your own mental health story, if you are willing and able to share that, and why you participated in the 437 Project this year?
You want to start?
Sure. My name is Benson Langat. I am originally from Kenya, but I reside here in Sioux Falls now. I am a therapist. I work with in the mental health profession. My mental health story started when I arrived in the United States in 2009, where it was wintertime, and coming from a country in Kenya where it's like 80 degrees minimum, 60 degrees sometime. You know, it's like I had never experienced cold before. And so arriving into the United States in the winter, and I was a track athlete at that time. And so I was forced to run outside all the time. I was not, acclimated to the weather. And so I didn't have vehicle. I didn't have friends at that time. So it really got me in a really deep hole in terms of like isolation. Food was an issue. I did not know where to go to get access food because, again, you don't have friends. You're in a new environment. I didn't know what to buy at Walmart because food were very different from where I come from. So anyway, got into a point where I was struggling big time, and I wanted to really go back home. Adjusting was really hard for me, especially in the winter. And so it took me a while to even adjust to the education system. I was coming in the middle of the academic year, so it was very hard for me to catch up with the language itself. And so I found myself like wondering, what am I doing here? However, though, being part of a track team really helped me in that space to really start creating those friendships and people to give me rides. And I remember I lived a mile away from my apartment, and I used to be a gym supervisor, so I used to walk a mile away every night at 11 o'clock at night, and it's cold. It's you haven't ate anything, you don't have anybody to talk to, and things like that. So got in a really, really deep hole at that time. But thankfully enough, I'm a quick learner, so I was able to adjust quickly. But it took the help of a friend of mine about realizing that I was struggling. I was not showing up and practice on time. Signs and symptoms of really struggling with depression and anxiety. I was not motivated with practice at all. Competition, I was struggling. So it took a friend to realize that. And so for me, that was my journey. That was my journey at that time. Every day we deal with everyday stress, career, overall well-being and things like that. So you deal with that. But thankfully, I've been a student in the profession, understanding how to cope with a lot of different stresses that you deal with every day. And so why did I choose to be part of the 437 Project? It was obvious for me to just be asked because I'm a runner, but more so because of the cost of what it was actually doing. So the why was, I told the mayor when he asked me, he said, Benson, let's run across the state. I'm like, sign me up. And I didn't know the logistics at that time, but he said, we're going to start from one corner of the state to the other. And I was like, sign me up. That's easy, right? I keep using the word easy. But I said, sign me up. But when the more we start talking about mental health, I thought we were just gonna be messengers. But really, the reason why is I started looking at statistics. In South Dakota, we struggle with a high rate of suicide, and I'm like, wow, I want to do it for a client of mine that I passed away. And I started thinking about so many people, and that became an easy ask for me to be like, I'm just gonna run. So my big why is community. It's about individuals in our community. It's about the wellness of our community.
Thank you, Benson. That was awesome. My name is Carter Gronseth, and I work as a nurse in the emergency department at Avera McKinnon here in Sioux Falls. My why for running revolves around my work, and my line of work that is we do a lot and we see a lot. It changes every day. It also kind of revolves around my mental health story as well. I truly think that some of the situations that we get into are less than ideal. Doing CPR on an infant is traumatic. And then going to the next room and someone's yelling at you because they want a sandwich, or situations like that where you leave and you're like, oh my gosh, I am drained from this day. And I'm not necessarily talking about it. And this took me like 5 years to realize that, okay, maybe I should talk about this outside of work. And when one of my coworkers came up to me and she was like, all 5 of us go to the same therapist. She's great. I think you should start going to her as well. And I thought, I think I should start going to someone just to talk about things. And it's truly amazing how you can just express what's going on and find better solutions to making yourself a better person. When I was presented with the idea of the 437 project, Benson said, the running part is easy. And I thought, the running part is not going to be easy, Benson. That made me nervous. But I thought, this is something that I can train for and I can set myself up for success. And I know I'm going to do good for other people and bring awareness. So it was a challenge to myself. And I am so grateful that I trained for it. And truly, the running part was the easy part. You got out there and you knew that in this 10 miles, it's going to be tough, but I'm going to get through it. And then I'm going to have a lot of time to relax and spread good messages among other people in these community stops that we went to. So yeah.
That was awesome. Both of you have incredible whys, incredible purposes, and incredible reasons for running. It sounds like you were really impacted, and we'll get into that as the conversation progresses. But let's start with the beginning. Let's start with the basics. So can you tell us how the 437 project came to life, if you even know? I don't even know if you know the history. I assume you do. But how this came to life, and then what is the mission of the project, and how did you get involved? I mean, both of you kind of just shared that, but like, was there like one person or one thing that you, kind of made you say, yes, let's do this?
I was part of the beginning, the process of, and I think Matt Smith, who's here today, he ran it last year, really big ambassador of the 437 project. Alex also was a runner last year and this year as well. And then Brittany, who is a volunteer this year. So just want to thank them for being here and everybody being here. The 437 project was actually an idea brought up by the mayor and said, hey, we're passionate about running, but our mental health in our city and our state is struggling. And so how can we use that to bring awareness? So he came up with the idea, with the passion of fostering both mental health and physical health. And we all got together, and it was obvious that our city and our community needed that. And so we thought about an idea of running across the state. And so the branding of the name, the 437, was actually the distance from the end of, from Belle Fourche to Sioux Falls. And so that idea came about. And really the mission for it was to raise awareness for mental health and suicide prevention. And part of that was to raise awareness for the Helpline Center, which is the only accredited suicide crisis in the state of South Dakota. And so that was when we were trying to identify who was who the beneficiary of these funds would be. We needed something that would cover the entire state of South Dakota, and that was Helpline Center. And so the goal was to bring those, to bolster those, both running both physical and mental health together.
Do you have anything to add? Awesome.
covered it well.
Well, I think Benson covered it. So that's what if you had anything else to add, I was going to ask. So we all know that suicide is the leading cause of death for those under 34 in the state of South Dakota. How does the 437 Project help shine a light on this issue and also help to provide support for this great need that we have?
I think one thing after you said that statistic that came to mind is we had this year the Memory Mile, which was the last mile of our race coming into Sioux Falls. And there were signs being held by family members that had lost a loved one to suicide. And almost all of those were young people. That is huge that we are losing so many young people to a preventable cause. We just need to start talking about it and start opening those doors to finding resolution to what's going on in their mind. What was the question again?
The question was, how does the 437 Project help to shine a light on this need?
So that does it exactly. Seeing all these people at the community events that would come out and share their story, but then also their friends, their family that would come. And if we can share our message to those people who can then go and check on their friends, who can go and check on their friends, that's how it's the domino effect of how we can get our story out to so many people. I think it's also awesome that we have podcasts that we're on, like associated with the news, we're associated with the paper, we're reaching all different sorts of generations through social media, through all those different ways to get in contact with all ages.
I'm curious now that you've made that mention, just you're triggering some communications minded questions in my brain. Who do you think has the biggest reach? From the different mediums that you used. So you're on press, all of you have been part of interviews on the news. It's been getting tons of coverage in South Dakota magazines, in even Iowa and Wyoming magazines. I think I've seen stuff. It's all over social media. What do you think has the biggest reach?
I think that with our generation that we are in, I think the social media, all of those news stories go to social media. All of the interviews go to social media. So we all have different platforms that we're proud to share that we've been a part of this on. So I do think that, for instance, like Facebook or Instagram and Twitter, those have the biggest reach.
Mm-hmm. And was that part of y'all's fundraising strategy, was to utilize your own personal pages to help to raise some funds?
Yes. The event company coached us on how we should reach out via our channels. Unfortunately, I don't have LinkedIn, but that is one that I missed. Nurses don't need LinkedIn.
You need to get on LinkedIn. Actually, nurses are probably the one kind of sector that maybe doesn't need LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I'm a weirdo. Benson, do you have anything to add?
So from a communication standpoint, we saw coverage that we were covered by a TV station in Florida. So the first day we received a text thread that we had received that we were being covered in Florida. So a lot of it really is just through the education that, this was a big deal. Avera did a training for us on how to communicate this message about mental health and suicide prevention. So we're sending the message to individuals that, hey, when do you ask that question? And all these key points that Avera was helping us out. Us as runners, we were the messengers. And so statistics were what blew me, just got me so walked up about we are one of the worst states in the country with suicide rates. And so being able to voice that message as we run across the state in our communities through social media and other services, that we were able to use, that really, really helped pass the message across the state.
Well, not to get political, but I think Florida could use our messages. So I think it's great that they're getting some view time. So let's just, let's keep pushing it out to neighboring states. So we know that physical and mental health are equally important, and that both are contributing factors to our overall well-being. So how did you keep your mental and physical health in check along the route?
I can start. It was crazy how we started this with strangers, complete strangers. I knew Benson before, but I really didn't know anyone that well before hopping in this RV with 6 women that I had no idea and a driver that we had no idea who they were. And truly the support that just human beings can be so positive towards each other and so uplifting, that is what got us through this. I had one run that was miserable at the end, and I wanted so badly to stop running and be done. And next thing you know, Ronnie jumps out of the RV and she's running alongside me. She goes, then she started talking about something else, and I wasn't even thinking about running anymore. So it's like that beauty of just having positivity from one another was really the mental health that I needed throughout that journey.
I'll go. One of the things I had an advantage being a returning runner was I knew what to kind of expect. So I went in there. It was 3 returning guys and 3 new guys. I knew John Meyer a little bit. I didn't know Micah as much, and I didn't know who Ross was like. I mean, I knew who they were like from the community, but instantly you become friends. Like you realize you're gonna be spending 3 days. At some point you'll be exchanging some, like talking about different things here and there. But I had the advantage of it knowing when to practice my nutrition, when to practice and when to get some rest. And so I was trying to coach some of the individuals there. But it got to a point where personally, it wasn't so much about the physical experience I'm going to experience, is the weight that I'm going to be carrying. And that's what I was preparing myself for. It's like, so I did put out on social media, like, if you know anybody who has struggled and lost life to suicide, let me know of their name so I can put them in my shirt. That's the thing that I really struggle with the most, because I knew I was going to carry the weight of all these individuals who I don't know their stories, but I'm carrying their names. So personally, I was preparing myself mentally for that. So one of the last legs, and if you've seen on social media, the picture of me putting my hands out and in the dark, that was when I had finished one run that was really, really challenging. And I realized I was running even faster the last few miles, is because mentally I was extremely tired, and was just like, I needed to remember why I was doing all this for. So mentally for me, from nutrition, from hydration, from getting some rest, from recovery, and knowing the journey why I was doing it is what really carried me to deal with my mental health.
Wow, that's really powerful. I think both of what you just said, what both of you just said, really hits home the point that we're trying to make with this 30 Days, 30 Stories project, is that stories are so important. Obviously, the statistics are so real. We have an immense amount of young people dying by suicide, but the stories are really what makes it. And Benson, you just mentioned that you were carrying the weight and leading this legacy of so many people who have gone before us. And that's emotionally taxing, that's got to weigh on you a little bit. So I mean, it's really powerful. So my next question is about a little bit of those stories. So how did you promote health and well-being, especially mental health, obviously, in the communities that you stopped and had events at?
The one that comes to mind the most was our experience in Mitchell. One of our runners, Lisa, had her own personal story that she shared, and this was in front of her community of people where she lives. And her bravery to stand up on stage in her hometown and share her story with many people that had no idea what she had gone through was exactly what this is all about, is standing up and being vulnerable. And that's what we were all doing on stage. I am not a public speaker, and so standing up there and then crying on stage was very vulnerable to be open like that. But that's what makes a change, and that's what starts a conversation.
Anything to add?
To that point too, last year when we were in Pierre, Mitchell, there weren't as many people, but this year there were so many people who in my guess is they had seen the impact of the project last year, and having Lisa being there, they all showed up. There were so many people out there, and you see people crying and really like taking it in. Like, and there's so many stories that we struggle with it ourselves. Like, we got into our vehicles and we were like sitting quietly and thinking about it. And for me, from that standpoint, I was just like, this is a really big task. I mean, we went to Pierre. It was emotional when one of the couple that had lost their son, they were our drivers, the guys RV, they shared their stories, and you sit with them and they're telling you a lot of things that they miss about their son. And so for us, I think we were sending the message through running across the state in the rural areas where nobody's at. And so having our vehicles branded as a 437 project, ask a question, even the people who were driving were reading that. They were looking it up and they were asking, what is this? Because we had people actually stop and ask us when we were doing exchange and asking, what is this? And people were making donation at that time. And so all these messages, we were talking about that, and I'm sure they know what what we're all about. They're looking at statistics, and so it was helping with that.
That's really cool. I think it's fascinating to think that one event, like a run across the state, can bring so many people together. And it's literally, I mean, look at the work that is being done. Over $250,000 raised simply because 12 brave people thought that we're going to run across the state and raise awareness. It's just fascinating. I also think it's a little bit nuts because only runners get how difficult this is. So, I mean, as a fellow runner, I get it. I already said I'm a weirdo once, and I'm going to keep saying it. But you all get it, like runners get it. And so people come together over this taxing thing that is physical but also mental. I just think it's really fascinating. Anyway, I had to say that. What is something that y'all learned along the way? Whether it was from a community member that you stopped along, whether it was from someone who donated in a pass-off area, whether it was from a fellow runner, or just intrinsically, what's something that you learned?
I thought about how this is impacting not just Sioux Falls, but of course our entire state, and how 988 and the helpline can be of resources to these people. When we were out in the middle of nowhere, the closest gas station was like 30 miles away. And I'm just thinking, how do these people ask for help if their neighbors are so far, like they're so isolated? But to think that they can just call a phone number, which there's cell reception most places, they can just call or email or text or ask for help. That is wonderful that we are all able to, no matter where you are, able to use that resource. And so I'm just so thankful that we were able to give this money to the helpline to help create even more resources out of that. Yeah.
Benson, what's something you learned?
I learned that South Dakota is really beautiful when you're rolling. And it's also very hilly, just saying. When you're running, it's hilly, but sometimes when you're driving, it's not that hilly. But most important thing that I learned was the community support, that the people are aware that there's a need, and they rally themselves to show up and really want to promote this cause. And really, like, this is something that our state is in much need for. So we saw the donations this year. 250,000. It doubled last year's donation, and it's all these companies and individuals that are coming together and saying, "Hey, we see a need. We want to step up," and that's what really I really liked about it, because people were bought into the mission, and the message was getting out to everybody, saying, "Hey, we want to help." And for us, the runners, we were just messengers. And so for me, it was just like the collectiveness of these individuals and companies who said, we want to make South Dakota a great state to live in.
You just said something that is perfect for our segue. So I want to talk about this collective of people, because this podcast is all about connecting people and reimagining systems. So a collective of people working together, a collective of programs and projects and resources working together to improve the mental health ecosystem. So I want to consider some solutions to the epidemic of mental health and suicide in our state. So, how does the 437 project do that? I'm asking the big questions now.
Okay. So how does the project, the 437, do that? I think it's establishing the clear goal that mental health is it's a need. And Thomas from Avero said, one thing that stuck me is like, when there's a crisis, we need to show up. In my African culture, when somebody cries for help, you stop everything you're doing and you run and support that. We all collaborate, like what you guys do at Lost and Found, like that's phenomenal. What the 437 project is doing, what the Vera is doing, what 988 is doing is identifying the goal of saying, okay, this is a need. How can we all work together? And so for me, that is identifying the goal and really looking at the resources available, and then diversifying those resources into, to help meet the needs of this, of the entire need that is there. But I think the 437 project, in my opinion, was to create that awareness. And then now that we get all these people asking for help, now other agencies can take on. It's like, okay, we can take it from here. And that collectively we serve, we help our community.
Definitely. Anything to add, Carter?
Yes, so I'm going to go back to what I learned at Augie in nursing school in community health class. They taught us how the key to successful healthcare is all in the primary aspect of it. So preventative care. We all should be going to a primary care doctor to try and prevent issues from happening. They have checks that they do your lab work, they do all these things. So what are we doing as preventative care for mental health? Are we going to a therapist? Are we doing things that improve our mental health, whether that be, are you exercising? Are you eating healthy? Those kinds of things. That is a way of prevention, as well as getting this word out that the 437 Project did, rather than being reactive once something happens.
Definitely. I can't remember which runner it was at the finish line celebration, but someone said, what if we taught our children that when you're scared or feeling unsafe, you call 911? What if we taught them the same thing about 988? When you're feeling sad or unsafe or unwell, you call 988. So I think that's really kind of the point that you're trying to get.
Yes.
Let's be preventative and let's talk about it rather than waiting until it's spilling over and we're making an impulse decision to harm ourselves. So exactly. I think that's a great point. All right. So my next question is, again, about collaboration. So how can organizations like Lost and Found collaborate with other organizations and entities like the 437 Project to create more effective systems of support for South Dakotans?
So I can speak to what the Helpline is doing specifically, is creating resources for those that have just lost a loved one. Maybe it's grief support groups, or they are showing this documentary of a young lady named Emma who has a wonderful story of how she attempted suicide and is now living and is spreading the good news of being alive and taking care of herself. So those different things that the Helpline is doing with the money is phenomenal. And similar to Lost and Found, being able to share stories is wonderful.
I'd say from a standpoint of data sharing too, sharing data to see what's going on out there, what communities need the help. Think about the rural South Dakota, like we think about Sioux Falls, we think about Rapid City, but in between there's almost like nothing going on, right? There's so many people struggling out there. So there's the data sharing of these are the hot spots. I remember we were crossing a city, and somebody shared me that this is the city in South Dakota that there's the highest rate of suicide per capita. And for me, I didn't know, I was like, wow, this is crazy. It's a small town. But it's but what resources are out there? And so really looking at, diversifying those resources, but working collectively as organizations with the main goal to really work together to maybe share the data, maybe communicate some ideas, and through funding and through other processes to be able to like, okay, you go do this, and the other organization cannot do that. And so I think from a data standpoint, I think that would be cool.
Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just piggyback off of each other. Yeah, definitely. It's almost like I prepped you on this because you're segueing me once again really greatly, Benson. So, speaking of resources, what are some strategies that hold the most promise in suicide prevention? Anything that you all have seen work really well in our state, in our local communities, or just in your life in general?
I'm going to let you speak first.
From my standpoint as a therapist, I think I get a lot of my clients from the 211 and 988. And so that is a resource that's already available. And Alex shared this during our session when he was talking about what the Helpline is doing, and the 988 is they're getting so many calls. And that is a resource that's available for everybody. So if you know anybody that's struggling with, thoughts of suicide, having suicide ideation, and really struggling with anything, having the access to call the number, it's already available, and I believe you can text the number as well. And also thinking about, more education, normalizing mental health and talking about it. It's like asking the question, Avera came up with that. And by the way, they reached, I don't know the numbers yet, but they received a national and international award for the Ask the Question. And so that is something that we can all do. If you know somebody that is struggling, you ask them a question. Are you contemplating suicide? Are you asking that question? That's what all we can do. And I think that's working out really well, being able to open the space for someone to be able to make the phone call and say, hey, I need help. Because South Dakota, many people, I've learned this, many people are stubborn and they don't want to pick up the call and say, I need help. And so really it's just all of us here using that resource and saying, hey, let's call someone and let's call this number and ask for help.
Are you saying South Dakotans are stubborn? Couldn't possibly be us.
I think that Ronnie she was one of the other runners with us, and she made a really good point by saying, sharing a good statistic, that only 30% of people that commit suicide or die by suicide have reached out to a mental health expert. Only 30%. So there's 70% of people that don't reach out to anyone. So how can we reach out to them? As a nurse, I ask a screening on every single patient that comes in, for no matter what you come in for. 3 questions. Do you feel down, depressed, or hopeless? Do you have any thoughts of suicide, or have you ever committed suicide or attempted suicide in the past? So the fact that I ask all these patients, complete strangers, but do I really ask my friends, do you feel down, depressed, or hopeless? No, I don't necessarily. And so that just shows that we need to ask our own people, because they're not necessarily going to seek help. So it kind of turns it on to us.
Speaking of us, I'm curious if you had any conversations with community members along the way at any of the community events or stops about the resources or support structures that they're utilizing or that are working really well in their communities.
I heard multiple times of people, and even Abby, that had shared she had reached out to 988 after losing her son, and how many resources that they provided her, and how helpful that they're not only responding to her call, but following up with her, and just months down the line, they're still very involved. And I do think that some of the most meaningful interactions that I had with people along the way were just the simple hugs from a complete stranger that said thank you. And that means the world to me.
One of the stories that Lisa shared, and Lisa, she had been to behavioral health before, and she said, if it wasn't for behavioral health, I don't know where I would be right now. And her why for running was to really bring awareness to mental health and suicide prevention, because she later shared that she was only going to talk about her sobriety, but really talked about more about attempting suicide. And so all the stories, that's some of the open stories that we heard. But then I saw many people when some speakers were sharing, they were tearing up. And I was wondering, what is your story? What is your story like everybody? And I was asking myself, what is my story? What is my story? And I put it on myself to ask myself, am I really doing okay? And I challenged the guys, when Alex actually was running, I challenged the guys in our RV, and I said, we are running here, but do you all think that we all figured it out? And some of them said no. I mean, all of them said no. I've struggled with mental health at certain capacity. So every story is very different. And for me, it was impactful when all these top leaders in our city or state are telling you their stories, and you're like, wow, I am not alone. And so everybody has a story. And for me, it was so impactful that people are willing to come out and share their stories, and to really know, like, this is a crisis in our state.
It definitely is a crisis in our state, and those stories are... Hey, Train, thank you. Those stories are very powerful. I was at the finish... Seriously? Great. Okay, we're going to keep trying this.
Hey, I'm going to say something about the train here. When we were running, we got so, like, when you're out in the wild, I mean, out in the roads and stuff like that. Not the wild. We didn't go to the wild. But anyways, so we were competing on who's going to get the most honks from the semi. So that's actually very appropriate for here. So.
Well, did I win? Do I win?
You got a lot of honks.
Oh, Alex, I'm in competition. Okay, I see you.
Lisa was aggressively going like this to driver's honk. It was like, wouldn't you go like this, Lisa?
Oh my
It made me laugh.
I love it. Well, I was going to say that I was at the finish line celebration, and Lisa's story really got to me. I obviously, working in the world of suicide prevention, I have seen the impact of suicide. I have lost many people in my life to suicide myself, which is why I'm here. But seeing Lisa share her story so vulnerably and so authentically for the first time in front of everyone was just, I mean, it just, my whole body was in just like, my goosebumps had goosebumps is the best way of saying it. I was just like full body, wow, this is wild. But anyway, I'm making that point because stories are powerful, which is why we're all here today, because 30 Days, 30 Stories is the project we really are working on. We are driving the point home that stories are part of suicide prevention, and by sharing our own stories, we can encourage and empower others to share theirs. We can normalize the conversation around mental health and really, really do the work. So, with that being said, stories obviously help us to connect, grow, heal, learn, and so much more. So I'm asking, what is one story that you heard on the route while running, whether this was from another runner or a volunteer or a community member, that stood out to you and really impacted you, and maybe it changed the way you thought about things as you were running? Maybe I heard a couple of you say that you changed your why throughout the way. What is a story that really resonated or impacted you?
In Rapid City, Kelly Marshall, was one of our runners, was representing the Swanson family from Chamberlain. And I know this story because I know it from last year. And so his daughter was talking about how their dad was this amazing person in the community, a community leader who everybody would go to. And when she received the news that her dad had passed away, she could not believe it. Like, what do you mean, my dad? That's not. And so to find out that the dad had passed away because of suicide, it took her out of like, I can't believe that's true. But really, for me, what struck me is even though somebody might be all dressed well, they're always smiling, you don't know their story. And so checking on them is really, really important, and asking that questions like, hey, how you doing? Are you really doing okay? Like going even further, be like, hey, talk to me about those things. And I can say that because, I mean, I'm trained in that capacity. But not everybody who is just work, everybody has a story. And so don't assume somebody's not, don't just assume somebody's doing okay. Just get close and ask them that question. I think that what impacted me, because sometimes myself, honestly, I'm like, people look at me, I'm always smiling, I'm always there. I'm like, but in the back, it's like, could be struggles, could be struggles. And so that pushed me to a point. I'm like, ask for help, Benson, when you need help. And it is okay to ask for help.
You may have just answered this, but my follow-up to that is, how are you going to use the stories, and maybe this one that just impacted you specifically, to help you and challenge you as a community member and as a mental health advocate?
I know one thing I learned being at Leadership South Dakota, when we were at the Air Force, in Ellsworth Air Force, one of the officers was telling the crowd, was telling the rest of the airmen that seeking help is a sign of strength. And so they're trained to be tough, but seeking help is a sign of strength. That for me is something I want to do, is encourage people to be like, seek help. It's a sign of strength. And also, you matter. I always tell my clients, you woke up today because there's a purpose for you, and you have a reason for your existence today. So just know that you're loved and you matter. And so asking for help and seeking for help is not a weakness, but it's actually the biggest strength that you have.
That was beautifully said. Thank you, Benson.
Yeah. Benson hit home there. I would say the story that meant the most to me is Riley shared the story of Brady at the finish line. And I knew Brady, and to know that he had everything going for him, and he had just accomplished graduating from PA school, and he had a job, and he was living in a cool place, like all of these things going for him, yet you don't see what they feel inside. And if no one asks them how they feel inside, sometimes it's not shared, and then sometimes it's too late. So yeah.
Well, I think you just answered the how are you going to use that story to continue bettering the world as a mental health advocate. So I won't ask that, but thank you both so much for sharing. Before we wrap up with final thoughts, I'm going to ask Brittany and Alex if you have anything from the run that you would like to share, and I'll bring the microphones to you.
I just think that we're so pleased with the amount of support we got along the route. Everybody there, like Benson mentioned, random people coming up and stopping, what are you doing, giving us donations. It's just fantastic. I just want to point out, I work at the Helpline Center, from our perspective, it really did, we're really seeing some change, some improvement. I think Benson mentioned our 918 calls have gone up. You can call, text, chat any time of the day. Those are going up. Those are increasing. Some people might think, oh, that's a bad thing. You're getting more calls. But I think it's a great thing. People are actually reaching out for help. And that is what causes change. That's what helps them. That's what stops them before they reach a point of crisis where they do consider committing suicide. So I just want to point out that what we're doing here is working, and we really appreciate all of your support, and we ask that you continue that. So
I'll piggyback off that a little. I know you guys touched on Lisa and Abby and John, and I think just being a part of it, and Benson said it in the beginning, like, this is going to be a life-changing experience, but starting with them on Wednesday and seeing how brave and vulnerable they were sharing their stories. We're sitting here now and we're still in a group chat, and we are getting messages from other runners about people coming up to them still, like today, sharing their stories and thanking them. And I think that just shows it's like what they're doing, and the word is getting out there, and opening that conversation is huge. It's okay to talk about it, and it's okay not to be okay, and opening doors for people, and it's making a difference, and we're still seeing it. So
Thank you both so much for not only being here and running and supporting the project and supporting Lost&Found, supporting the Helpline Center, but for just being mental health advocates. Matt, You just missed it, but I asked former runners and volunteers for any insight. Do you have anything that you would like to share about the run last year, this year, how it's made an impact, etc.?
It's a lot about, we've talked about sharing your story and making connection with people. If we didn't learn anything going through the pandemic, we should have learned we're built for relationship, and we need each other, and we're better together. And as somebody who helped as a volunteer from home and not being on route, I really had a lot of FOMO the last week because I was missing out, and I was texting these guys on the road, and I was looking for everything. And there's some really strong relationships that have been built in this project, but it's been really cool to engage with the community and get people talking. I work at Dakota Bank, and we have over 600 employees, and the number of people, because I've made myself available to others that will come and talk to me about mental health things going on with them or with their family, is amazing. And 18 months ago, before I was ever associated with this, that wouldn't have happened. So share your story, be there for others, and have empathy. And you don't know when you face somebody what they're dealing with. So don't be quick to judge, be quick to listen and lend an ear and just be there for people. So it's been a huge impact on my life, and I'm hoping that collectively we can impact a lot more lives.
Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap up with some final thoughts here, and then we'll kick it open to open questions from the audience. So final thoughts from Carter and Benson. What is one thing that you've learned in your life that you wish everyone would know about both mental health and storytelling?
I think it's what I would love to say is that it's okay to cry and be vulnerable and let those emotions work them out, because you're always going to feel better after. It's okay to show how you feel, and even if it's in front of people.
Oh, I think that most places in this town have seen me cry, so.
For mine, I actually wrote it down, and it's and I have to read it out loud to make it to make sense of it. And I said, empathy is the bridge to understanding. When it comes to mental illness and suicide, it's essential to recognize that individuals who are affected by these issues are often face significant emotional pain and struggle. Sharing stories with empathy allows us to connect on a deeper level, to a level into another, to be able to get into another person's shoe and understand the challenges and emotions that they may be experiencing. So really at the end of it, really is the word empathy. And that is like, if I share my story in a space where I don't feel like it's not, I mean, that's it's not gonna go anywhere. So having empathy to see what somebody's really going through, and the power of storytelling is so amazing, and it really changes lives. So for me, I tagged the 437 project this year as a life-changing experience, because the running was easy, but the stories that I heard along the way, and if I didn't have the empathy to really let that be there for me, then it wouldn't have worked. So this journey, it's all about, for me, it's all about empathy. That's something that I've learned.
Beautifully said. Anything to add? Awesome. Was there anything that you thought that we would cover about running, storytelling, mental health, suicide prevention, just life in general that we did not talk about today that you all would like to share with our audience?
I don't think so. We had a really good time, and it wasn't all deep and heavy. We also laughed a lot, and there were a lot of smelly pranks and fun things that happened too. So it was some animals and cats and cows in the ditches.
Cats and cows and ditches. That, yep. I mean, do we have a new rap?
I think I am quoting Alex. There's a lake in Woonsocket.
Who knew? I don't even know where Woonsocket is, to be honest. So
it's the sister city, I heard.
Oh my
of Sioux
gosh.
Falls.
I love it. All right. Well, we're going to open it up to the public questions. So Eric has questions. So I will go ahead and read these, and we collectively will answer for all of you. So the first question, and this is for both Benson and Carter, would you do this again? This meaning the run or the podcast? I'm not sure which, but answer for whatever you would like.
Absolutely. I would love to be a part of the whole event again. Benson?
The 437, I can run. That's easy.
She's ready.
I'm ready to. I actually want to run the other way if you ask me to do that tomorrow. No. On a serious note, though, I think it's for a good cause. Yeah, I would do it again, give it a chance. But I want to give other people a chance to experience it as well.
Definitely. I appreciate that. All right. This one is for you, Benson. How many names were on your shirt?
I had, by yesterday evening, I had 37.
Oh, my God.
And that's only one from Minnesota, from a 14-year-old to an 87-year-old.
I mean, mental health doesn't discriminate. That shows it right there. 37 names on your shirt from 18 to 87. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Oh, my God. 14 to 80. That's even worse. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is powerful in and of itself. The next question from the audience was, what was your favorite part of the whole run or experience? I like that you call it an experience rather than a project or a run. It makes it sound better.
It was an experience. And I would have to say the people that I met, especially those people that like our runners, volunteers, our core group of people, but then also the people that I met all over the state. It's the people that did it for me.
For me, relationships. We had 5 volunteers and 6 runners. I went in there knowing Paul and Alex, of course. We know him for being a prankster. But it's those relationships that came around. Like we had moments where we're all crying together. We're all hugging and we're sweaty. We're all stinky. You know, I feel bad for Brittany. She's our RV driver. All the stinky guys are coming in there. And she didn't really mind us. She was having the best time. But really, at the end of it, we're talking about it at the end. I have never experienced 3 days with different people and come off with amazing relationship, a lifetime relationship. Last year was the same thing. This year was even better. So I saw this relationship, but really thinking about we're not getting paid to do this. We're just out there running and being in pain, and all those stories that you're gonna be telling someday. But I'm gonna say this though: out of the all experience, I've run marathons across the country and part of the world. This is by far the best running experience I've ever been part of, and this is so.
All right, the next question is, how can I get involved? And then it says, besides running. So I'm assuming this means volunteering, but if you wanted to run, answer that too.
Yes. Matt sounds like a great ambassador that you could talk to. Otherwise, the volunteers, you guys, as a runner, we had to worry about nothing. Besides our run, we just sat back and relaxed, and someone would text us when we need to set our alarms. Someone text us when we need to eat, when we need to do this. We had to worry about nothing. So these volunteers are what made it happen. And I'm sure we could use more volunteers.
The 437 project website, you can go in there, submit your name if you want to volunteer for next year, because I think that was the process. You submit your name and say what you want to do, and I think the team, the project team, will go through that and perhaps reach out and saying if you could be involved. But I honestly think everybody can run across the state.
It's all a mental thing.
It's more mental than it is physical, and that's coming from a former marathoner myself. And so, I get it. But one last question. We have a very long one here. Do you find goal setting a benefit or detriment to those experiencing depression? And then there's several other questions, so I'll ask them one at a time.
I am a very goal-oriented person, so I couldn't get through a day without like a checklist. That is how I roll. So goals are important to me, and I think it's detrimental without them. However, if you have the type of personality that fixates on that in a negative way, I could see how that could be detrimental.
From a clinical standpoint, I'm going to step outside that a little bit to my favorite quote by John Maxwell. He said, to be successful, it's on your daily routine. And so you'll never be successful until you change something you do every day, right? And so I use that concept, and I use cognitive behavioral therapy to really kind of put things in perspective. Is a lot of the stuff is know why you're dealing with something. Structure helps a lot, but goal setting is a good thing. But also, what is somebody dealing with? It could be a traumatic event that they've experienced. And so to getting to that point where you actually having a goal is maybe a goal to get better, maybe a goal to reach out to something. I believe in goals, and I like goals, but understanding what somebody's dealing with, it would be helpful to help with that. A lot of the time too is like, identifying what the goal is, that you're trying to work on. That's my interpretation of that.
I do have one more thing to say after. Benson has been my running coach for a long time, and I think it's important to have those goals in mind, but then also if you don't succeed at whatever you're doing, keep in mind that it's all about the journey. Carter, you had a great training for this, even though this race didn't happen how you wanted it to be. So reversing how you're thinking about it.
Okay. I think that is all the time we have for this evening, but you all can learn more about what we are doing with Lost and Found at 30stories.org. That is our website for the 30 Days, 30 Stories project. We are at resilienttoday.org on all social media platforms if you want to follow us there. And then, of course, follow the 437 Project, and all of the funds raised have been given to the Helpline Center, so make sure that you're supporting them as well. One last thing before we go, please make sure that you scan the QR codes on your tables and submit that feedback form for us. And you, like I said at the beginning, at the top of the show, that you are entered as a chance, you have a chance to win a $25 gift card. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And one final thank you to Remedy Brewing Company once again for supporting us. Until next time, listeners, stay well. Audience members, thank you. I love you, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review Great Minds wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information about Lost and Found, go to resilienttoday.org. That's RESILIENTTODAY.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Resilient Today. Until next time, do more and stay well.